This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
He praises China's new energy vehicles for reshaping the industry's landscape. He expresses gratitude toward the Belt and Road Initiative for advancing connectivity. He opposes decoupling and advocates eliminating misunderstandings through dialogue and cooperation to promote enduring peace. Former Belgian Prime Minister Yves Leterme sat down for an exclusive interview with Leaders Talk. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to Leaders Talk, where we meet leaders, thinkers, and trailblazers. I'm Zhou Yun. Our guest today is former Belgian Prime Minister Yves Leterme. He has visited China many times in past decades. So what impression did China's development leave on him? What unique insights does he have on the Chinese path towards modernization? While China and the European Union celebrate the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, what aspirations does he have for the pragmatic cooperation between the two sides? Let's find those answers from our conversation today. Mr. Leterme, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders Talk. You've been here in China over 20 times in the past 2 decades, also including during the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. So what changes taking place in this country that really impress you the most over the period?
Well, I've had the privilege to visit lots of places in China. And what I saw at the start was a overwhelmingly impressive deployment of infrastructure development, investment in roads and railroads and high quality infrastructure. You still see this in Greater Bay Area, Shanghai, Beijing, but it's actually spreading all over China. Right. And so I think for a Westerner, both the, let's say, the volume of infrastructural development, but also the speed is really, for me, the most impressive. And together with the fact that the situation of the people, the citizens, the average citizens, is really improved over the last 15, 20 years, of course. Yeah.
Belgium is one of the Western countries that established diplomatic relations with China early on. Since the establishment of diplomatic ties on October 25, 1971, bilateral relations have steadily developed with increasing economic and trade cooperation. The port of Antwerp-Bruges in Belgium is the largest export port, the largest automobile port, and the largest integrated chemical cluster in Europe. This is where cooperation projects under the Belt and Road Initiative are located. In 2022, the container freight volume between China and Antwerp-Bruges exceeded 1.7 million TEU. Over the years, the port of Antwerp-Bruges has engaged in shipping cooperation with several coastal ports in China and maintained railway links with many Chinese cities through China-Europe freight trains. As ships shuttle back and forth and China-Europe freight trains crisscross the Eurasian landmass, economic connectivity between the two countries as well as China and Europe has been enhanced, which has infused new vitality to the exchanges and friendship between the peoples of the two countries, as well as between those of China and Europe.
Well, you come from Belgium, which is one of the very first Western countries to cooperate with China. And through the past decades, the economic and also trade cooperation between the two countries are booming. So what's your outlook on that front?
It is indeed true that Belgium acts as a kind of gateway to Europe.
Right.
We are a flat country, not too big, 30,000 square kilometers, with a port area close to the North Sea, and with historic cities, Antwerp, Bruges, Ghent, Brussels, capital of Europe. And so starting from that, we have at a very early stage tried to invest a lot in connections with China. There has been a lot of Belgian investment in China, historically speaking, with companies like Janssen Pharmaceuticals in Xi'an, like Bekaert in Shenyang. But the opposite is also true. So, for instance, part of our new development of the port of Antwerp is owned by COSCO. And we have lots of Chinese companies that already invested in Belgium. And for instance, our infrastructure is also used by the Chinese car industry, electric vehicles industry, to bring the new EVs to Europe. So we have a very strong economic connection between Belgium and China. Yeah.
You spoke highly about the manufacturing level, the world-class manufacturing level of those new energy vehicles produced by China. So how do you think about the cooperation in that area and also the entire competitiveness of Chinese or those made in China products?
I think when you refer to vehicles, it is a fact of life and fact of history that in terms of fossil fuel driven cars, American and European constructors, companies had a kind of were far ahead. And it was not easy for Chinese industry to catch up. I think now it's a little bit the opposite. So in the new developments, electric vehicles, for some reasons, like for instance the possibility to start from scratch in China, also the fact that you have some natural resources that are very critical to produce the battery, the vertical integration of your industry in that field. So for some of these reasons, in terms of electric vehicles, it's just the opposite compared to the old-fashioned automobile industry. And so you're ahead, and I think we still are trying to find ways to catch up. And our existing car industry, car assembly lines, that are also very present in China, they have now to re-engineer both their product, but also the way they produce their automobiles.
Well, despite this cooperation between China and Belgium, China and other European countries, there has been some frictions on and off between especially China and the EU. So how do you think this bilateral relation can keep moving forward despite all the challenges and differences?
I think we should not lose our temper and we should stay cool-headed. I think it is not strange that at a moment that China re-enters the world's history and in such a short period of time shows what I would call an unprecedented socio-economic development, that is a global rebalancing of power.
Yes, revolutionary changes.
And so the fact that there are some problems and challenges to adapt to the new reality for the existing incumbent powers, that should not come as a surprise. But I think these are hiccups, these are transitional problems and challenges that we should face cool-headed, in a cool-headed way and with a lot of rationality, and try to avoid conflicts and antagonism to deepen. And I think we are now living a very important juncture, a very important moment in our relations between US and China, the EU and China. And I think it's really key that the European Union tries to keep on its own positioning and not just be the junior partner of the US, but develop an own view. We share the Eurasian continent. We live on the same Eurasian continent. And so we should try to continue to invest in mutual openness, fair trade, a level playing field that is fair to our companies, protection of investment and trade. I think, for instance, that the European Union should approve, all institutions should approve the investment and cooperation agreement. The statements made by the Vice President of the European Commission in September about trade to say Europe strategically doesn't want to decouple from China, but we want to de-risk our supply chains. I think that's the right approach. Yeah.
Talking about de-risk or the notion of decoupling, which unfortunately is some of the European countries who are now trying to mapping out a kind of strategic or economic safety strategy. But you have been always a very strong believer in multilateralism and free trade. So are you concerned about that, the so-called decoupling and de-risking from China?
Decoupling is not a solution. I think everybody should understand that all the nations in the world, they try to safeguard their vital interests. And in serving their citizens, they have to manage in the right way issues like the safety, security of their people, including the sovereignty and the territorial integrity. But on the other hand, that should not lead to protectionism. And so we should remain open to each other and invest in this interaction, and so not decouple, but try to safeguard our interests, manage the risks of, the risks for our global value chains, for our interactions economically, and make sure that our economy can continue to function normally also in times of emergencies like pandemics or natural disasters, strengthen the resilience of our value chains and supply chains, but in a good cooperation, in full transparency to our partners.
China recently introduced a new policy, which is the visa-free policy for 6 countries, notably 5 of them are European. So how do you think that will impact the future of China-EU relations?
I think the visa facilitation, the visa-free travel is of course an excellent initiative. I would hope that my country would qualify as soon as possible for the same kind of easier access to China. I think it is crucial. Free movement of people builds up new possibilities of exchanges, facilitates trade, facilitates exchange of students, teachers, professors, researchers can travel more easily. So it's an excellent thing.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Yves Leterme served as the Prime Minister of Belgium twice during 2008 to 2011. In August 2008, he attended the closing ceremony of the Beijing Summer Olympics, praising China for its perfect hosting of the Games. In May 2010, Leterme attended the Shanghai World Expo. He has maintained close engagement with China over the past 2 decades and consistently emphasized the importance of strengthening cooperation and cultural exchanges between China and Europe.
We should offer more possibilities for young Europeans to learn Mandarin. I think we should massively invest in it and make it possible for more students from Europe and from China to have a year of learning, a year as a student in Europe or in China, in the other part of the globe. This would increase the mutual understanding. This would be a fantastic asset for these people personally, also for their future.
Addressing the challenges between China and the EU, besides being cool-headed, besides being rational, you have always put a lot of emphasis on the paramount importance of people-to-people exchanges and enhancing those relations. Why that is crucial from your perspective?
Well, first of all, because I think that peace and good understanding is too important to be left just to professional leaders and politicians. It's in the interest of all citizens of the world that we find peaceful ways to settle our differences in opinion or diversity. In the European Union, we've learned to live with diversity. And for the first time since a very long time in world's history and in European history, we manage now to, since more than 80 years, to have a peaceful coexistence of very different cultures. We don't share the same language, we don't share same governments and same systems, and nevertheless, we now manage within the European Union to live peacefully together. And that's also based on an understanding between entrepreneurs, on creating a free market, on creating free movement within the European Union, free movement for citizens, for students, for instance, the Erasmus program, offering the opportunity for students to learn to go to university in other places, to go to school in other places. This makes a kind of underpinning vast mass of people, of citizens, that are used to interact with each other beyond the borders. And that's important, that in the mid and long term, I think that's a decisive element. We have handicaps between China and Europe, for instance. I apologize, for instance, I don't speak Mandarin. Lots of Chinese have an excellent knowledge and practice of English. You practice better, in a better way, English than we practice Mandarin. This is a hurdle, but notwithstanding this difficulty, by the way, I think that an increasing number of European young people want to learn Mandarin, but so notwithstanding this language-linked problem, we should overcome this and intensify our exchanges, make it possible for entrepreneurs, for business people, but also ordinary citizens to travel, to learn to know each other, to improve access to each other's culture, intensely invest in people-to-people connections and exchanges, and in the mid and long term, that delivers lasting possibilities for lasting peace.
This year marks its 10th anniversary, so how do you interpret the significance of the initiative?
I think the best proof that it was relevant to take that initiative is the fact that the European Union now is building a same kind of project of gateway, a European gateway. Interconnectedness is key, and what I find of paramount importance as a European citizen in Belt and Road is that it works on the interconnectedness throughout Central Asia. You have a vast territory in between, so to say, Pakistan, India, and then you have lots of the Stan countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and then you go to Russia, and then you come in Western Europe. And so for us as Western Europeans, it's important that you develop this interconnectedness, not only in the air, but also over the seas and in the solid infrastructure, roads, railroads. So I think this is an excellent initiative, and it's also good that there is from the European side now, the European Gateway Initiative, which not completely the same with other tools, but also tries to invest in interconnectedness. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Leterme, you have been a very strong believer in economic cooperation, common infrastructure, and co-investment. And you have also said that those not only bring better economic cooperation, but also peace. So can you further elaborate on that?
Of course, you can never exclude conflicts between economies that cooperate, but it's a fact of life, it's a fact of history that when I was referring to the European integration, the bold step was after the Second World War to say we will merge the French and the German economy. We will merge the economy of these two nations that have been fighting very terrible wars over the recent past. In the 19th century, the two world wars, where the main blocks was Germany, Prussia, and France. And so the bold step after the Second World War was to say we will merge coal and steel, and starting from that, we will create synergies between the economies, and then came the free movement of capital and goods, free movement for people. And so I think once again, when you integrate the economies, when you make it possible for people in their daily lives to experience all the benefits of open borders, of more possibilities, more access, more chances for their enterprises, for their children to learn, to go to schools, to exchange in the cultural field, I think you build lasting peace. Yeah.
There have been ongoing talks about the weakening of strategic autonomy within the EU, especially after the Ukraine crisis broke out. And some of the European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, have been calling for a boost of this autonomy within NATO. What's your take on that?
I think that Mr. Macron is right. And so we should make sure that we ourselves, Europe within the NATO alliance, are less dependent of the American support to protect our security, protect our societies when there is a conflict. Europe is a small continent surrounded by instability. We should not rely on the US to protect our security. We should be able to do it ourselves, and this means to invest a little bit more in the means and the tools that you need to safeguard security.
Now China's peaceful rise has been interpreted differently by different countries, and sometimes it's about unfair criticism, especially from Western countries, including European countries. First of all, why do you think it is important to understand China in a fair manner? And what do you think is the right approach to make sense of China's growing influence?
I think the key element is to look at the facts. The facts, the figures, and the reasons why things happen. I think that's fundamental to understand each other. Mm-hmm. It's not to believe in all slogans and buzz that is launched sometimes. Misinterpretation, mispresentations, wrong presentations of reality. When we think about recent debates or recent statements that have been made about China's development of its military potential, for instance. Mm-hmm. I think it is normal that a nation like China tries also to give itself the means to defend itself and to defend its interests, like we do in Europe, like we increasingly have to do over the next years. Crucial there is to understand each other, to see the facts, and not just to rely on, let's say, biased information that comes from circles that don't serve the long-term interests of people.
You've been here in China many times and you have a really close connection with China. So which part of this misinterpretation of China worries you the most?
For me personally, I think that we have to be very careful in terms of decoupling the economies. I referred to it before, because that's really not in the interest of citizens. And the second is that we should have more dialogue about the vital interests of the Chinese nation and of the Western world. And I would hope that in the next time, the next years, that there would be more platforms where that rational exchange on the vital interests of the Western world on the one hand, but on the other hand also China in terms of its security objectives, that kind of platforms of rational exchange could be multiplied.
How do you understand China's path towards modernization?
I think we in the West sometimes make the mistake to look at China as a, economically speaking, very homogeneous society and economy. I think there's an unprecedented socio-economic development at the benefit of lots of citizens within China, but there's still some way to go in spreading the progress all over the population in all parts of China. The second is, and that's a common challenge we have with the Western countries also, is to make this socio-economic development sustainable from an economic point of view, sustainable from a social point of view in spreading the wealth and building up solid social security schemes, and also from an environmental point of view.
Well, Mr. Leterme, it seems that you have this love for Chinese culture, for instance, Chinese food, particularly Chinese dumplings, we heard, Peking opera, and your wife loved qipao, which is iconic traditional garment for women. So, first of all, is that true? And what kind of, what part of Chinese culture and Chinese philosophy fascinates you the most?
Well, it is right that in traveling throughout China, you see beautiful landscapes, but also you see traditions, culture, and that we try to pick up what is the nicest and what is the most sometimes exotic compared to our way of life. Mm-hmm. And I think this kind of exchanges and exposure to Chinese culture should be multiplied. You have so many nice places. In Mongolia, the Jiuzhaigu Valley, the Hainan Island, you have fantastic places, I couldn't name them. Well, to give the opportunity for Western people and for the Western people to seize that opportunity, to come to see and to enjoy, also with the trade, with the visa freedom now, it's made more easy. I think that's of utmost importance, yeah.
Well, you were born in a Belgian town called Wervik, which actually...
Wervik.
Wervik. That town has a very special bond with China because during the World War I, the Chinese laborers, they have done much arduous work, including clearing the battlefield and also reconstructing work.
I was born in Wervik, which is close to Ypres, but the story of the Chinese soldiers is more in the Ypres salient.
Does this part of the history give you a special emotional attachment to China?
This, of course, is a token of solidarity. They were shipped at 18, 20 years old at the start of their life, and they helped us. They helped the nation. They helped to free us and to overcome what was happening, the challenges. So that unleashes emotions. Still today, we have a memorial museum in Ypres, which is a city that was at the center of gravity of the so-called Ypres salient. Terrible battles around Ypres. Well, the fact that Chinese young people came there to help us, like Australian, New Zealand, British soldiers, American soldiers, that of course is still touching. Yeah.
Right. So, Mr. Leterme, it was a great honor having you here with us on Leaders Talk, and thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you. During the interview, former Prime Minister Leterme said that in the past few decades, China has achieved unprecedented achievements in economic and social development. At the same time, it has made significant contributions to the sustainable development of the world economy. He hopes to see further expansion of cooperation and win-win outcome between China and the European Union, which will bring benefits to the people of China and Europe and inject more vitality into the prosperity of the world. With that, we're going to wrap up this edition of Leaders Talk. I'm Zhou Yun reporting from Guangzhou. Thank you for watching and see you next time.